We all know there are a million different ways to make a living, but on this show, we are curious about those businesses that you might not know about. We're going to take a deep dive every week and talk to a successful person in their field to learn about how they got their start and how they continue to make it in their space. Join me and learn more about the business of. Welcome to the business of websites and e-commerce is what we're going to be talking about today with Mike Brown from Cyber New York. So welcome, Mike.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So your company is about 25 years old, but you've been kind of in this realm for longer than that. Can you tell us, walk us through how you started your company?
Sure. Yeah, the way I got started, it was really in a roundabout way. About 30 years ago, I was interested in multimedia, and it was really before the internet had taken off, as before the dot-com boom. And I was very interested in developing touchscreen interfaces or kiosks. And back at that time, they were in use for ATMs, and that was about it. So I was developing prototypes for initially developing business card layouts and letterhead layouts for print shops, so somebody could come in and touch, design their printed good, and send it off to a print hub. And then, and that's where Cyber New York was born. That was the original intention. And I developed a number of prototypes for fast food ordering food that would print out, give you a ticket number, and you could, just exactly like what is out there today.
And this was 30 years ago.
About 30 years ago, yeah.
Idea.
Yeah. So the internet had been around, and the World Wide Web was becoming big, websites. So whenever we would pitch the concept to different organizations, they would say, "We love it, it's great, but could you do this on the web?" Mm-hmm. If you can imagine, that's everybody was interested in that. So after hearing that a dozen times, I hired my first employee because I was not a web developer. And we started moving the prototypes over to the web and went in that direction. And that's what really got me into websites. And I would say that's around 25 years ago when we started.
So before the dot-com boom and everybody really having, now you can't start a company without having a website first, basically. You don't exist without having one.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that you saw this kind of coming ahead of time.
Yeah, it was great to be involved with it at a time where you could really get in at the ground level and learn everything from scratch, because I was learning as well at the time. And so it was a really interesting period of time.
So you had, how many employees do you have now?
12.
12, okay. And you've been able to kind of, the dot-com boom, and then everything has gone up and down since then.
Yeah.
How have you been able to ride out some of those
it's been
changes?
It's been a real adventure in our time in New York. We used to be, for a long time, our office was actually in Manhattan on 23rd Street. And we were there during the dot-com boom, the bust. September 11th, we were there, which was probably harder on us than the dot-com bust, because literally in New York City, at that time, the streets were cleared for several weeks, and our phone did not ring for a week, and then 2 weeks. And then we had clients that went out of business. I lost staff members that just left the city. So that was probably the toughest. And then we've been through several recessions since then. So it used to be very hard, but now I've gone through these cycles, and one of the things that we would do is we just learned how to scale the business and how to pull it back. And you always have to be prepared. Mentally, you always think that you're on a trajectory of growth, but you also always have to have a backup plan and how you can scale back when necessary. And I think another important thing was that when you hear, in the kind of services business that I'm in, you have a lot of control of when you want to call it quits, because you can exist at a lot of different levels. And if you're passionate about what you do and it is what you want to do, then you can survive by pulling down, as long as you do not over leverage yourself or get into a situation that would put you under. It's easier to scale back, and then knowing that within 6 months to a year, there's going to be more of a growth cycle.
Have you seen, with the last year of the pandemic, has that been a growth cycle for you, or has it been a pullback? Just, I know you're still New York based, and knowing that New York has gone through some scaling back in terms of people moving out of the city, it does feel like it's back to not pre-pandemic levels, but it's certainly, you're getting more livelihood, but everything's also gone online in the last year and a half. So has that changed your business?
Yeah, it really has. It was quite a shock. And, so our office is now in Brooklyn, and we've been in Brooklyn for 3 years. And we don't really consider ourselves web developers anymore.
Okay.
We're more of a tech firm. We have a platform that we build our websites, a cloud-based product that we build our websites on. And we consider ourselves more of an e-commerce agency. So that transformation happened over the last, 5 years. But when the pandemic hit, we had, as everybody did, we had a lot of plans and a lot of growth. One of which was, we're preparing for the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival. This is now our second year, but our first year in 2020, we were booking live locations, and I was a week away from getting on a plane with my team to go down to South by Southwest to pitch the film festival and get distributors on board. And my partners were I remember we were sitting in a cafe, and I'm still planning because I've already shipped stuff down to Austin, Texas, like trade show displays and everything.
Right.
And I can remember the look on their face, because we're sitting there and I'm still talking about like it's happening, and they're just really pretty sure it's not happening. And we got up to leave, and then somebody said, "That's it. They just shut down South by Southwest." And that was really like a tipping point. After that, we saw a significant drop in our business. Of course, everything went online, but initially, we consider ourselves an e-commerce agency, and one of our clients is one of the largest restaurant equipment suppliers in the United States, and they're down in Indianapolis. They supply cruise ships, they supply school systems, all these institutions, and they are part of a larger holding company. So they were one of our larger, at that time they were approaching becoming our largest client, and they were going to double the business they were doing with us. That immediately dropped to a level we hadn't seen. We had discussion.
Right.
They had to pull everything. And then our second biggest client is a franchise of learning centers, in-person learning centers, Huntington Learning. And they had to strategically, because schools were shutting down,
right,
they couldn't have the centers open. And while you think about it, there's great opportunities there for everybody, but initially nobody can pivot that fast. Right. So we had to suspend all initiatives. So that's like two of our bigger clients. And then every other client, we work with a lot of independent film clients, and we're doing a lot of theatrical, so all theaters closed. So that was the first hit. So I just stay calm, and I look at the numbers and the cash flow just dropping off. And there's an employee that's been with me for 25 years, and his motto is, he goes, "You got to start preparing to make the tough choices." And it didn't really come to that, because within about a month to 2 months, the opportunities started to come up. So we took our film festival. It was really to promote the digital platform of streaming video. And so now we just instead of canceling, we just went all in digital. And so we put all of our efforts. If we were losing clients and we didn't have work, then we're going to spend 20, 40 hours on the platform. So we invested our time into our Logic CMS and its streaming video capabilities, and that kept everybody really engaged. And then the opportunities started to come in. One of our clients, Kino Lorber, was the first to push the concept of virtual cinema. And what virtual cinema does is it shares revenue with independent art house theaters. So if they had a film that was being distributed that was going to show at your art house theater, like say the Enzian in Maitland, Florida, for example, it's a real theater, and it was going to show in May, then they will show it digitally. People buy a ticket at the same price, and then they do a split of the revenue. So that keeps the independent art house theaters open. And so we developed that system. And even at the time, the client didn't want to go all in on it. So we made a decision, let's just build this.
Yeah.
And we built it out in 2 weeks, and then we showed it to them, and they were like, wow, this is great. What do we need to do to get this? And it's yours. And we told them it's yours if you want to use it. And they did. It got a lot of press in IndieWire, and it was really embraced. And then others, created the same model in different ways. But so digital video for theaters, everything went virtual. So our film clients became our biggest clients now.
Interesting.
And home video started to boom. And we do also physical product e-commerce.
Okay.
So surprisingly, I don't know who buys DVDs and Blu-rays, because I do not for years. But there's a huge.
I just found a box of DVDs in my basement that we haven't opened since we moved 2 years ago, and I was like, glad we moved those.
Yeah. Well, cinephiles and collectors still buy them, and I don't know if you remember during the pandemic, there was a time, I think, when Netflix crashed, YouTube, Vimeo, they all went down. And so the DVD and Blu-rays just soared. And so some of our clients, we have West Coast, Shout Factory on the West Coast is a major distributor of DVDs and Blu-rays and original productions. Their sales started to go up. Kino Lorber here on the East Coast and all the other clients we work with. So all of a sudden, those became our biggest clients. So, and this really was a transformative movement that all happened within 3 months.
So were you able to almost pivot the business from being mostly web development, where you were looking to showcase and bring Logic CMS to a wider audience, to now you're using that more for your clients than your typical web development part of the business?
Yeah, we started that about 5 years ago, unrelated to the pandemic.
Right.
About 5 years ago.
Well, I hope you didn't know there was going to be a pandemic.
Yeah. You know what? I always think something's going to happen, pretty much. I didn't know it was going to be a pandemic, but at this point, living in New York City over this it could be anything, but we had sat down as a group and we discussed. 5 years ago, I said, you know what? Web development is dead. We can no longer refer to ourselves as web developers. It's not a space we want to be in. And we need to develop a platform, and we need to find a different business model than we had been using, for 15 years, maybe 18 years at that point, a traditional agency model with client retainers and custom production of websites. And, the market, everything was really transforming.
And what made you decide that you needed to change? Like, where were you seeing that the market was saturated, or?
I just saw that if we continued doing what we were doing, I would tell them, when we first moved into our office at 23rd Street, across the street, there were a couple of guys that worked in a basement of, I think, the Hancock building that worked with punch cards. And these large insurance companies still have data on punch cards. And there's a story about these, and one of our employees has seen it. And I said, we don't want to be the guys working the punch cards. I said, we could still exist, another 10 years, but the web as we know it is going away. It's being replaced by platforms like Shopify. It's, Facebook, Instagram. They really don't want you to leave. Everybody is really greedy to own the client data, the customer data, and keep them on their platform. So they're rapidly developing methods to circumvent the need for a website. So we have particular clients that still have to have a website, but the way you build a website now is different. You don't want to get entrenched in custom development. It can often be too expensive and it takes too much time. So what we did was we developed a hybrid model where instead of doing every website from scratch, we took all of our code bases and put it into a platform that can be redeployed, and we made it modular. And then we add onto it and we do a release push of enhancements almost on a weekly basis. And we managed to migrate all of our clients onto that platform within a period of about a year and a half, 2 years. And this was leading up to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So we're already on the platform. We started, we were doing a lot of DVD and Blu-ray sales for these clients. And once again, with the punch card analogy, the clients were still making more money with physical media than other forms of media, because if you think about it, when digital streaming, the margins are just lower.
Right.
They have a lot more control of the margins with physical products. So they'll really kind of try to work that until it just goes underwater. It's upside down. But I didn't want to wait for that point to happen. And so we started going all in on digital, and it just all kind of converged at the same time. But we always have to kind of be adapting or we'll become irrelevant. And we love our clients, and most of our clients we've worked with for more than 10 years and some of them for 20 years. And I don't want them to have to awkwardly find another solution because we're friends, and I feel like we're kind of partners. So it's up to us to really make sure that we keep things moving along in the right direction.
So were you guys able to also, like with the pandemic, go to being fully remote for all of your employees pretty quickly? Was that something you had already set up for people, or was it that was already
That's something that was easy for us because after September 11th, we were all working remotely, but I had always worked remotely several days a week, and our chief technology officer did the same. After September 11th, when we reestablished our office, we started moving, it wasn't called the cloud at the time, but we started moving everything to servers, all services, and we made it mandatory that everybody worked remotely at least 1 day a week. And this is, 20 years ago.
And that's unheard of.
Yeah. And so by the time the pandemic came, we were working 2 to 3 days. We had everything that we had was online and multi-location. Because seriously, we've been through Hurricane Sandy. We have been through, clients' buildings flooding. All of our stuff is distributed. So that wasn't a problem. Now I go into the office and I'm the only one who goes into the office. I happen to like it. And I've got this really big space. But I think the bigger challenge will be getting them to ever come back in. But some of the staff members got much more productive working remotely. So I think for many reasons, I didn't understand why people don't remote work for the most part, if you can. And I think it just makes sense for the environment and for people's lifestyle, and it's worked well for us.
That's great. A lot of business owners don't have that point of view, I feel like, but I think that I think there's benefits of both, being able to be more productive when you're at home or working remotely wherever you are. But then some collaboration, whether it's, there's so many tools out these days, and I'm sure you guys have even more than the rest of us. So you've been through a lot of different cycles in your business, been through ups and downs. What is one challenge that you never expected, outside of external forces, that you had to overcome that really surprised you?
Well, there are so many. one challenge that sneaks up on you is if you're, becoming successful in growth, you're never more vulnerable than when you're growing. And in the past, when we were in a growth cycle and I would increase staff, and I've seen it happen with so many of our clients in the past, and you really have to be careful of what you're getting organizationally, what you're getting yourself into. And if you really watch, a lot of businesses that are rapidly growing, or even have grown over a couple of years and are at a high level, that they're very vulnerable to changes. It's like, I don't want to say it's a house of cards, but it's very hard for them to weather a drop in revenue. So I was really caught off guard back during like the great, not the Great Recession, but the recession that followed September 11th, because we were in a big .com growth cycle.
Right.
And I had invested a lot, and I had a lot going on in regards to office space, and we opened up a San Francisco office, and you just think that it's never going to stop. And so we adjusted to that, and then ever since then, it's like I get nervous if we're not growing, and I get nervous if we're growing. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And part of that is along the way, you're really psyched if one of your clients becomes huge, and all of a sudden you're generating a lot of revenue, and they're generating a ton of revenue based off the work that you did.
Right.
And we've gotten into that situation before. What you really have to watch out for, you can never have a client be more than 50% of your revenue. And so whatever you can dream of, X amount of dollars would be a big deal. You can get very lost in that and excited, but you have to think, what happens if that client moves on? So one of the best things that probably we managed to do over the last 10 years is we're very diversified, and it really kind of relaxes things. We don't have any one or two clients that if they disappeared, it wouldn't have a major impact on us. We would have enough of a runway to adjust.
That's really smart. When somebody
my wife used to always tell me about that, because I used to say, "Oh, this one client," so she goes, "You really have to watch out for that." And I was like, "Why?" But anyways, it's just I would love to take full credit for it, but she told me, "You really have to watch out for that." So she was right.
Well, that's smart. And what's one thing that you're most proud of that you have accomplished within your business in the last 30 something years?
Just the longevity of it.
Yeah.
My daughter just went off to college this year. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And which is really strange. It's like lost my baby girl is off at college, but when she was born, I was doing Cyber New York, and that was a large part of why I worked remote a couple of days a week. And then later on, my son was born, but it's really something. It doesn't feel like it's that long for me. It's just gone by in a flash, but the longevity, and along the way, I work with. I'm always telling stories to my family or to friends. I'm like, "Oh yeah, my friend," and they're like, "Oh, do you mean so and so at work?" And I'm like, I really consider that they're my friends, and I've worked with my friend Jason for 25 years, and he's an incredible artist. And I've worked with Craig and Manny for over 10 years, and our at the time our chief technology officer John Nunez, really good friend of mine, one of the first people I met when I moved to New York. I've been working with him for over 25 years, and it's great, So now, if you interviewed them separately, it might be a different story, but I love that,
No, that's great. I mean, I think you spend so much time with the people you work with that when they become friends, it makes it easier, it makes it more fun to do what you do. And yeah, longevity is something that is such an accomplishment, right? To have a company that's still successful and continuing to grow and go through all the changes that you've had and pivot and make new business decisions. I think that that's really smart.
Yeah. And I'll mention that on the client side, we've made a lot of friends that, I really consider them to be friends, and we engage them like we're part of the company. So if something's not going right for them, it's not a business. I feel bad. I feel I want to do better. I don't want to let them down. So I love that. I like to care about, what we're working on.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was so interesting to learn more about what Cyber New York does and learn a little bit about the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival. So thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.